Finding peace in this crazy mixed up world can be challenging these days, can't it? Everything is turned upside down. Everybody's working from home, and if they're not working from home, they're challenged to practice social distancing. And there's just kind of an undercurrent of stress everywhere, it seems. Earlier this week, in part one of my session called Finding Peace in Relationship and Religion, I talked about the fact that I believe that God is using this as an opportunity to revive or create a renewal for a spiritually dead world. I also talked about the fact that Jesus promised us that he would bring us peace, and there was a gift that he had to offer us, and it was a gift that we need to open. I believe wholeheartedly that those are things that we can find if we really seek him out in relationship. I want to talk a little bit more about the conversation that I had with another coach, Tim Widner, that I discussed in the last episode. And I want to share some of the conversation that he and I had. I think you're going to find it to be really interesting. So please stay with me and see where you come out on the whole discussion of, is it relationship over religion, or is it relationship and religion? I'd love to know what you think. Welcome to Longing for More, where Christians come to strengthen their faith, revive their soul, and learn to live their lives with a sense of fulfillment and peace. Listen each week to learn how to incorporate your faith into your daily activities, stop wandering through life feeling empty and unfulfilled, and begin to live your more. Let's get started. Before I get into the conversation with Tim, I want to share a little bit about this conversation with you. First of all, it was the first conversation that he and I had had together. It was intended to be just that. It wasn't set up as a podcast interview, but the conversation really went deep fast, and there was just so much beautiful information in there that I asked for permission to share it with you. So without going any farther, I want to tell you who Tim is. He's actually a coach for business owners, executives, and leaders. And he's the host of the Seek, Go, Create podcast. And he's an author. He has a book coming out this summer. He and his wife, I love this part, they consider themselves nomads. They're basically homeless, living out of an RV trailer, traveling the world, or at least the States anyway. And so this interview or this conversation came from basically the front of his RV, and I thought that was really pretty cool. So you're only getting parts of the conversation today, the parts that are relative to this conversation of relationship and religion. I already talked to Tim about the possibility of having him come back on the show for a real interview at another time. So I really enjoyed the conversation, and I think you will too. So here is my conversation with Tim Widner about relationships and religion.
I was kind of hard charging success, was going to make some money and do things in business. And, if God could participate in that, good for him. But other than that, I was going to kind of make my own way in on it. You can kind of know where that story goes.
Yep.
And so I was saved in 1991 at a business conference. We got involved with the Amway business, multi-level marketing.
Okay.
And I was working corporate Bell South after I got out. And so the reason I bring that up, especially with around people of faith, is that my paradigm is very different than many when it comes to church. And really the way we're doing religion and church now in our society at times can be somewhat bothersome to me, because I was saved in the marketplace. And I have a real strong marketplace mindset, marketplace missions, marketplace ministry mindset. And I even look at, the 12 disciples, and, they were business people. They fished, they were tax collectors. They, they weren't necessarily the clergy and the quote unquote Pharisees of the day. That's not who Jesus picked. So anyway, only reason I bring that up is that there may be some things that come out of my mouth that you go, ooh, this guy's, I'm not sure if he's a good church going guy. Well, I actually may not be.
And I'm a Missouri Synod Lutheran.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, right. So I'm about as conservative as you're going to meet. But I heard some really conservative things come out of your mouth on that podcast too. I just want you to know. But
Yes.
but what it's interesting. If you don't mind, I'll share a little bit of my background.
Yes.
So I grew up in a Reformed church. The no pianos, no jewelry, no cards. Very very strict. And of course, I was young enough that that didn't mean anything to me. But when I was in junior high, my folks got divorced, and we kind of quit going to church. It was hard enough on mom, and then when 3 teenagers were whining about it, and then the church
Glory.
literally told her if she didn't.
My wife Glory was 13 when her parents divorced, and her father was in ministry, which was even more of a dynamic for her.
Yeah. Mine thought he wanted to be a minister, but he found there were funner things in life to do. Anyway, so literally the church came to my mom and told her that she either needed to start contributing or she needed to leave. And with 3 teenagers at home saying they didn't want to go to church, it wasn't hard to make that decision. And
wow. So
we just quit going to church. And I hung around with the wild crowd, and I've had a lot of fun in life. And what's the way God got my attention was I got pregnant when I was in college as a single person, and everything changed from that moment. And so anyway, but what I think is interesting about you, I'm glad you shared your story, because so I've been a Christian all my life, sometimes closer than others, but I didn't ever have the relationship. I didn't understand that. But I went to church, I taught Sunday school, I did all the things. But I too was in the corporate world. I worked for the affordable housing, the state housing finance agency.
Oh, nice.
I retired from there 3 years ago after 30 years, and decided, God was calling me to something more, and I thought it was health coaching. And so I got a certification as a health coach, and it was kind of, he was like, no, we're not there yet. And so anyway, it's evolved into really just sharing my faith. And where I find my place is that it's those Christians who have drifted away, or maybe they haven't drifted away, but they haven't really, they haven't incorporated their faith into their life. It's that thing that they leave on the shelf until Sunday morning when they grab it on their way out to church, or they haven't been to church in years or whatever, but they're just in that in between. And so that's why the podcast is Longing for More, is because we long for more of Jesus in our life, and we don't even always know that. And life can be so much more amazing if we just reconnect with the most important thing. So that's kind of my story and where I come from.
Yeah, that's a great story. There were so many things that I'm glad I didn't interrupt you, because there were so many things that was flashing across my mind as you were saying that. And let me see which direction I'll go with that. Relationship over religion is probably one of the most important messages for us to be conveying currently. And the reason for it is that religion has caused more challenges and issues. And I'm sure you're reading a little bit of the leads and the mood on social media and things like that. I went to Bible school for 2 years and met some of the most incredible people, but also met some of the meanest people that you would ever meet in and around that environment. And it's because religion was more important than them to relationship. And I want us to think about this, because I think I brought this up on the podcast you listened to, but I did not say it with the passion that I would like to. Over the last 4 weeks, the Babylonian system has crumbled around. Every idol that has been built up is crumbled. Sports, entertainment, the university and education system, the government, religion. Let's think about this now. I love going to a big mega church. When we started going to church in the 90s, we went Pentecostal. So I like music, drums and all that. You said you had no instruments. Boy, I like, if you can't have an electric guitar in church, I think God loves an electric guitar. So I hope that doesn't mess with your doctrine and all that. But anyway.
I'm all over the place. I love it all.
Anyway, and we went down this prosperity gospel, which, just like most movements, there's good and then there's bad to a lot of that. So,
Mhm.
but so every system of the world, and the Lord brought me back. I'll just share with you some things from my quiet time. 5 years ago, when we walked in the doors at the Bible school up here in Colorado, I believe the Lord spoke to me. I don't like to say necessarily a thus saith the Lord, but in my quiet time, he spoke to me and he said, the Babylonian system is crumbling. It was designed to crumble. It was built around crumble. And he said, it shouldn't surprise you. And he says, you're of the kingdom. And he said, others are of the kingdom, but most of them don't understand what the kingdom is. And we could have that discussion, because most of us in our modern world, we even though we are quote unquote kingdom minded, we don't understand it because we're so wrapped around the Babylonian system. We're so into all of those things. And a couple of days ago, the Lord reminded me of that conversation I had with him 5 years ago, almost to the day. It was in March of 2015. And he said, I told you this was going to happen.
Wow.
He says, I told you it was going to crumble. And he said, I did not bring this on. He goes, a lot of people will start using the sovereign God message here and say, God brought this on us to bring us back to him. No, but Romans 8:28 says that God will use all things for the good of his people. And his people are those that are in his kingdom. And if you don't understand what his kingdom is, it's really hard to be in it. And so what I see is going on is literally a crumbling of everything. If you had told anyone 4 weeks ago that we would not be starting baseball season yesterday, that the basketball March Madness would not be happening, that the Olympics would be canceled and postponed, that
Right.
churches would not be able to meet in more than 10 people.
On Easter Sunday. That
Yeah.
blows me away.
And someone would say, oh, that's the enemy is doing that. And yeah, listen, this is the enemy, because the enemy is our enemy, so he's trying to beat up on us. But here's what you and I have that we know is that we seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, Matthew 6:33, and all these things will be added to us. And if you look at that verse and go back up above it, all those things are food, clothing, shelter. If you
Right.
do a study, I did a 1.5 year study on the kingdom of God when the Lord brought this to me. And what we're seeing is he is bringing those that desire, that long for more. How about that for a working in a branding there? That long for more to his kingdom. And he's going to use this to get the attention of people that will have nowhere else to go finally. They've had too many things to go. And this is what I was about to jump on earlier that you said. We live a Greco-Roman segmented life. In other words, I go to work Monday through Friday, and then I come home and I watch my Netflix. So I've got my work life, I've got my family life. I'll usually squeeze family in, maybe 2 hours a day, maybe. And I
Mhm.
count watching Netflix as that time, which you and I know that doesn't really count. The weekend, I'm going to play golf. And then on Sunday, I'm going to get cleaned up a little bit, even though we don't really do that much anymore in most churches. We we just go as we are, which is good. And we show up and we check that box. And then Sunday afternoon, we come home and we're probably going to do a little bit of fun. We're going to watch TV again, and then we're going to start that process again. And we do not lead the 24/7 kingdom life. And what's interesting is that because of the way I was brought into the fold,
Mhm.
I've never separated my business. Now I've done better at it at
Hmm.
times than other times. And I could, if you ever want to have some good story, go back and listen to season 1 of the podcast, which the Lord told me to share my testimony of what we went through in '08. And I think the first episode is homeless and bankrupt, because in 2013 we had the sheriff knock on the door. We had to move out of our 6,000 square foot home that we had lived in, and
Wow.
became we I use the term homeless. My wife and I like to use the term nomad. It sounds more virtuous, maybe. and we and
Maybe.
we we essentially have been that way since 2013. Now we're doing it with provision and means, and he's blessed us and things like that. So I guess that was my long-winded answer of saying that anything that can move people towards relationship,
Yeah.
I'm all for.
Yeah.
And because I even see that there are many people in our I'll call it first world church religion structure, that it's just a check the box comfort zone for them.
Yep.
And they go and they hang out. And I think we're seeing that upended with what's going on too.
Right. And I think taking it away will make it more meaningful. In fact, I just sent an email out to my email list yesterday and basically said, a part of me wants to just fix this. Of course, I can't. But even if I could, I don't know that I would, because we have lessons to learn from this, and he's going to bring them to us, and he is already. You just see it out there. So yeah, no, I agree, and there's so much good that's going to come from this. So as you can see from the conversation, Tim and I come at it from a little bit different perspective, and I think that that's okay, because God doesn't want us all to come out of the same mold and say the exact same thing and all of that. We all have different experiences in life, and we all have a different way of living our lives. I think the reality is as long as we are loving God, putting his kingdom first, and developing that full relationship with Jesus that I talked about in the first part, that is when we experience that gift of peace of mind and heart that Jesus talks about in John, that I mentioned again in the first episode. So the conversation then goes on, and we begin talking about how important it is that we are in the Word, and that is definitely an area that we agree on.
You dig the topic. It's how to hear God's voice, and really it's actually some very practical things. The best way to hear his voice is to read his word.
Yeah.
And
Yep, I
say,
do
Lord,
know.
what would you like me to get from that? And it seems a little simple, but unfortunately there's a lot of people that need to hear that. The best way to hear God's voice is let's read his word, and
Right.
and have quiet time, and turn off all these, turn off all this stuff, and not have computers in front of us and stuff like that. So
And truly, those are some of the lessons that we are experiencing, that we're learning right now. We truly need to, anytime we go through something that's different, uncomfortable, challenging, we need to just stop and ask God, what is the lesson in this for me? And there are, as I've mentioned, so many lessons in this. But the real thing is that it's time to get back. It's time for renewal, and it's time to find that peace that passes all understanding. And there's only one place that I know that we can get that. So I want to finish this conversation with the conclusion of the conversation that Tim and I had, that I found to be just really, really beneficial to have.
I think that we're going to be in so much ministry counsel mode, even if we are in a business setting, because we have, we're both young, but we're also mature. And I've never seen anything like we're about to see in our lives. There's a great thing I posted recently. The head of Marriott, who's showing some great examples of leadership, got up and told his employees, and it's kind of gone viral a little bit, that they had like a 25% drop in vacancy after 9/11. They saw gradual drops after '08. He says this is those two combined multiplied, and they're at 90% vacancy rates. And just we don't know. If you look at a chart, I just posted on Facebook, the chart of the unemployment from just the last week, just go do a search of it. It's kind of going along, and there's the 70s, and there's all this, and then all of a sudden last week it shot up, and it shot up so much you almost can't see how high it went. And unprecedented, I guess, is the time we're in. The thing that we have is what happened on the cross, is that we have been reconciled with the Father, and all of the chaos that's been going on in the world, we have the Eden kingdom system at our disposal if we allow ourselves to operate and function in that kingdom. And I think that's our message. That is really what we share with people. And the
That's it.
Lord's told me, he said, share the kingdom. That's what he shared with me this morning when I was talking to him. He says, just share the kingdom. What is the kingdom primarily? It's love. That's the currency of the kingdom.
Yep. Amen.
It's not the finances. I hope we could actually see our currency collapse. And I mean, I study a lot of the economics and things, and we cannot spend the money we're spending. I mean, it's great. It sounds good, but we can't. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen. And so anyway,
Yeah. As we talk about so many times on this podcast, the beauty of our lives and the beauty of knowing and trusting our God is that all we get to know is what's right in front of us. He asks us to take the next step, and we do so courageously, not knowing where it's going to go. And I loved how Tim talked about how the God just told him to just talk about the kingdom. And I feel really blessed that I happened to be the person he got to talk to today when that was forefront in his mind, because it was such a fun conversation. And I'm just really grateful that Tim and I had that conversation, and I'm really grateful that he allowed me to share that with you today. It's an important place to be right now when we don't know what's coming. We can all guess, we can based on what our history is, but our God's the only one that knows where this is going. And if you haven't accepted him into your life, I beg of you to do that now, because it does come with a peace that does pass all understanding. And I, for one, and Tim and I may have this conversation again, but I, for one, really believe that that peace that we're looking for comes both with the relationship that we have with Jesus and the religion, that community that we can only get when we're with others of the faith. So anyway, I want to thank you so much for stopping by today. Your time is so precious, and I know that. And so it means a lot to me that you are here. I hope that you will go check Tim out. He's at timwinders.com. You can also check out his podcast at Seek, Go, Create. It sounds like I've listened to a couple, and they're really engaging every bit as much as this conversation was. And if you're interested in learning more about Vonna Johnson or Vonna Johnson Coaching and what I do, I would love it if you go check me out at vonnajohnson.com. It's been such a blessing. This is actually being released on Holy Thursday, and so I hope that you will take the time. Go find that church, any church, as long as it's in the Word and it worships Jesus Christ. Go and spend the rest of this Holy Week with the Savior of the world. There's no better time than now to get reconnected and have those meaningful connections. So you can't go hug on and love your loved ones, but you can over phone or Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. Just get reconnected, do the things that really matter, and then just go be blessed and live your more.